If a man loses it, he becomes egocentric, lonely, disoriented, and weak. He adds, the self is often symbolized as an animal, representing our instinctive nature and its connectedness with one's surroundings. That is why there are so many helpful animals in myths and fairy tales. The light that had moved towards Harry was revealed as such. And then the source of the light stepped out from behind an oak. It was a silver-white doe, moon-bright and dazzling, picking her way over the ground, still silent, and leaving no hoofprints in the fine powdering of snow. She continued to step deliberately through the trees, and soon her brightness was stripped by their thick black trunks. Caution murmured it could be a trick, a lure, a trap. But overwhelming instinct told Harry that this was not dark magic. Deeper and deeper into the forest she led him, and Harry walked quickly, sure that when she stopped, she would allow him to approach her properly. And then she would speak, and the voice would tell him what he needed to know. At last, she came to a halt. She turned her beautiful head towards him once more, and he broke into a run, a burning question in him. But as he opened his lips to ask, she vanished. After he witnessed the mourning that was taking place in the great hall, Harry ran into the headmaster's office and poured Snape's memories into the pensive. Even Snape's thoughts would be a blessed relief, and Harry dove in with a feeling of reckless abandonment, as though this would assuage his torturing grief. Snape's wound would not only teach Harry to walk into the arm of the mystery, but disclosed mysteries which held the key to Harry's identity. Snape pulled him out of limbo. It was a rude awakening for Harry, who discovered that the truth is inseparable from the one thing he had always had such difficulty with, namely paradox. The truth is often not what we expect. It is often not what makes sense to us. In adult faith, O. Merku shares his favorite definition of a paradox. It is a contradiction with meaning written underneath it. Our common sense, rational world is being contradicted. We are forced into a double bind that does not fit with our inherited expectations. The meaning is not on the surface. It is hidden from the immediacy of our gaze. In fact, it requires a different quality of wisdom and perception to make it accessible. Merku goes on to describe this more profound perception, which is unearthed from fear and emerges as hope. It boils down to two foundational human outlooks: control or trust. Our human urge to dominate and control may well be the greatest single liability of our so-called civilized world. Often, the more we try to control, the more everything seems to be out of control, which in turn drives us to be more controlling. Adults of our time know that control is not the solution. Trust is. Trust is the hope that everything is evolving, even in the midst of destruction. In the light of hope, destruction is shown to be an aspect of life's eclosion. Snape began to apprehend this more profound reality the moment he heard that Voldemort's defeat was impossible without Harry sacrificing his life. His shock was replaced by indignation. Would Snape walk away from his original promise now that what he had done for her sake was rendered, in a sense, null and void? No. Everything was for her, always. When he tore the photograph of Harry and his parents in half, keeping the part that features Lily's smiling face and discarding the other upon which Harry and his father were depicted, he was not yet ready to forgive, to love truly. But whether or not he was fully conscious of it at that point, in the depths of his heart, a distressing notion was making itself known. If he wanted her forgiveness, he too would have to forgive. Indeed, he could not be with her unless She herself was transfigured and became an image, an icon of what he had thought he would find in her. What he wanted lay beyond her. She had to become like a clear window letting through sunlight. Meister Eckhart put it this way: "This is what someone said who wanted to begin a new life afresh, and I replied, we must become somebody who seeks and finds God in all things and at all times, in all places, in all company, and in all ways. Then we shall always be able to grow and increase unceasingly and without end." Harry, the symbol of earthly things in Snape's eyes, like his mother Lily, was transformed. He became a window into heaven itself. When Snape died, he was guided to the next world, to the ultimate oneness by Harry, whom he could no longer view with hatred. Once Snape chose the better part, and it could not be taken from him, and he saw love with the capital L in Harry. No one in the Harry Potter story could control the outcome of events. Not Dumbledore, not Snape, not Harry, and especially not Voldemort. However, the ones who learned to trust when faced with situations that seemed absurd and wholly unknowable, the ones who continued to fight when the battle was lost, those were the ones who were preserved by the power beyond the reach of any magic. M.L. von Kratz writes, "People living in cultures more securely rooted than our own have less trouble in understanding that it is necessary to give up the utilitarian attitude of conscious planning in order to make way for the inner growth of the personality." He continues, "In order to bring the individuation process into reality, one must surrender consciously to the power of the unconscious instead of thinking in terms of what one should do or what is generally thought right or of what usually happens. One must simply listen in order to learn what the inner totality, the self, wants one to do here and now in a particular situation. Our attitude must be like that of the mountain pine. It does not get annoyed when its growth is obstructed by a stone, nor does it make plans about how to overcome the obstacles. It merely tries to feel whether it should grow more towards the left or the right, towards the slope or away from it. Like the tree, we should give in to this almost imperceptible yet powerfully dominating impulse, an impulse that comes from the urge toward unique, creative self-realization. And this is a process in which one must repeatedly seek out and find something that is not yet known to anyone. The guiding hints or impulses come not from the ego, but from the totality of the psyche, the self. It is moreover useless to cast furtive glances at the way someone else is developing, because each of us has a unique task of self-realization. Although many human problems are similar, they are never identical. All pine trees are very much alike, otherwise we should not recognize them as pines. Yet none is exactly the same as another. Because of these factors of sameness and difference, it is difficult to summarize the infinite variations of the process of individuation. The fact is that each person has to do something different, something that is uniquely his own. Individuation grows from the shock of discovering the mystery of authentic identity, a beingness that is beyond categories, beyond duality, a coming together that is a multiplicity in unity. The process is similar to these poetic words written by Philip Yancey. The deepest faith, what I have called fidelity, sprouts at a point of contradiction like a blade of grass between stones. Or as is written in the Tao Te Ching, the gentle and flexible belong to life. When Snape lay dying, his eyes, rather than narrowing at Harry as had usually been the case, grew wide. I am eerily reminded of a scene in Order of the Phoenix. His cold, dark eyes were boring into Harry's, who met his gaze unflinchingly, concentrating hard on what he had seen in his dream, willing Snape to read it in his mind, to understand. "I wish to interrogate him," repeated Umbridge angrily, and Snape looked away from Harry back into her furiously quivering face. "I wish you to provide me with a potion that will force him to tell me the truth." "I have already told you," said Snape smoothly, "that I have no further stocks of Veritaserum. Unless you wish to poison Potter, and I assure you I would have the greatest sympathy with you if you did, I cannot help you. The only trouble is that most venoms act too fast to give the victim much time for truth-telling." Snape looked back at Harry, who stared at him, frantic to communicate without words. At the end of Deathly Hallows, Harry and Snape's roles are reversed, except that, unlike Harry, Snape was poisoned following the Dark Lord's interrogation. He knew that he barely had any time to tell Harry what had to be done to destroy Voldemort, barely any time to convince him he was speaking the truth. Frantic to communicate without words, Snape simply poured himself out in rhythm with his flowing blood. After Snape had literally given his life to Harry, again the young man did not know what to feel except shock. Hogwarts itself was mourning Snape's death, which no one but Voldemort, Harry, Hermione, and Ron knew about. The castle was unnaturally silent. There were no flashes of light now, no bangs or screams or shouts. The flagstones of the deserted entrance hall were stained with blood. Emeralds were still scattered all over the floor, along with pieces of marble and splintered wood. Professor Snape was like the shattered Slytherin hourglass that had recorded house points. As the final battle was nearing its climax and Lucius Malfoy was sent to fetch Snape, whom Voldemort was about to kill, the hourglass spilt its precious green stones everywhere so that people slipped and staggered. I shall again turn to Emil von Franz for his Jungian insights. Perhaps crystals and stones are especially apt symbols of the self because of the just so-ness of their nature. Many people cannot refrain from picking up stones of a slightly unusual color or shape and keeping them without knowing why they do this. It is as if the stones held a living mystery that fascinates them. Men have collected stones since the beginning of time and have apparently assumed that certain ones were the container of the life force with all its mystery. According to Christian ecclesiastical symbolism, Christ is the stone that the builders rejected, which became the head of the corner, and a stone that causes men to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. Alternatively, he is called the spiritual rock from which water of life springs. Medieval alchemists who searched for the secret matter in a pre-scientific way, hoping to find God in it, or at least the working of the divine activity, believed that this secret was embodied in their famous philosopher's stone. But some of the alchemists, it's all right, dear, dimly perceived that their much sought after stone was a symbol of something that can only be found within the psyche of man. An old Arabian alchemist, Maurinius, said, "This thing, the philosopher's stone, is extracted from you. You are its mineral, and one can find it in you.